Hello everybody, Andy here again. This is one of those strange videos that I'm not quite sure how to approach it. It's one of those sort of topics that I've thought about for a while now, but was brought home to me very recently. Now, I've mentioned before here how long you've been around about my father. Now, my father is going to be 93 years of age in January next month. And up until a couple of years ago, he was always a very fit, very healthy person, very sprightly, especially for his age as well, was probably in better health and more sprightly and, with it, etc., than people quite considerably younger than what he is. I could think of my father-in-law, who is getting on for 20 years younger, and my father moved around a lot better than he did in some ways. But over the past sort of 18 months, should we say, age has started to take its toll, and I suppose what you would class as a quality of life has reduced quite a bit. What's happened recently, he's had, I'm not going to go into all that sort of health details, but as I said, age starts to catch up. Things start to wear out, I suppose, when you get to that age. And let's be honest, when you reach anything like that age, you've done pretty well. And there's no doubt about that. Very thankful that he has. But it's been brought home to us very recently. He had to go into hospital last week, getting confused as to the times, for like an exploratory operation type of thing. Now, straight away, my wife and myself, and talking to my mother, she felt the same way. You're thinking, this is a 92, very nearly a 93-year-old man. Do you really need to do that sort of exploratory surgery, should we say? Examination, really, rather than surgery, I suppose. But it's uncomfortable, it's unpleasant. Do you really need to put someone of that sort of age through that type of procedure? That type of grief, I suppose, if you want to put it that way, that ordeal. Because because they're looking, obviously you're looking for something, they're examining, they're trying to find out what other problems might be and what's causing them, etc. And you think to yourself, okay, so they do find something. Let's say they find a cancer or something like that, which is obviously one of the things that's uppermost in your mind. So many people succumb to that. So many people, was it 1 in 3 people, suffer that through their life at some time. And when you've got to 92 years old, there's a pretty good chance, your odds are running out. Let's put it that way. Thankfully, nothing like that was found. But if it had been found, what would have happened then? What would you do? How would you approach that? If you find something, you're going to say, well, sorry, there's nothing we can do about it, and quite rightly so in some ways. Partly the point of this particular video, if I ever get to the point of it, is that someone of that age, what would you want to put them through? What would they want to go through? Let's be honest, we need to look at this from both sides. You need to look at it from the person's point of view, but you also need to look at it from everybody else's point of view. Because what happened then after that, naturally, he took a turn for the worse. He went downhill. It takes a lot out of you. And then he bounced back, and then the sort of relapse came, I suppose. And literally last weekend, he went downhill very, very fast, spoke to mother, had to call the doctors in, and he had to go into hospital. And the state of him was literally the fact that I didn't think, and neither did my wife or my mother, I didn't think he was going to see Christmas, and that's how bad he was. Get to that sort of age, it takes a lot to bounce back from things. He was taken into hospital. Thankfully now he has recovered to a certain extent. He's still in hospital. I had that not very nice thought of having to go into hospital on Christmas Day afternoon. Okay, yes, to visit your father, no problem with that, but it's the first time I've ever done that. It sort of brings it all home to you, and this whole sort of thing makes you think about these something. I'm not after sympathy. I'm just trying to talk about a particular issue here. I don't want people saying, "Oh, sorry to hear it. I'm not interested in that." I just want to put this point out there because it makes you think about, yes, you can miss the person. There's no doubt about that. Of course you will. That's taken for granted, although it needs to be said. But it's that quality of life issue. What would you do? What should you do? How would you feel about that particular person? Because I've thought about having this conversation with my father recently, but it's never been easy to do. As I said, his hearing isn't what it was. But one thing that is good is that up here is as sharp as a pin, and that is one of those issues. I saw something recently about someone, I'm not going to mention any names, whose relative had just died, and they'd been suffering, literally, I think, with Alzheimer's for a number of years. And it's that quality of life issue, one of those things that I wanted to talk about, because if someone's even if they're not in the greatest of health, if their mind is still active, if their mind is still able and they're with it totally, they can make their own decisions. You can hold a conversation with them. That person, to me, they're still there. But they must. I often wonder what those people. Often wonder what my father might think, thinking to himself, "I'm 92, nearly 93. My time is running out. How much more of this do I want to take?" It sounds horrible, but it's one of those things that maybe needs to be thought about from the other's point of view. How much will you allow your loved ones to go through? I'm one of these people who actually believes I totally agree with living wills. If you don't know what that means, something that you can write down, you can put into maybe a legal document or something, which if you do have any sort of relapses, any sort of bad health, you're in a situation where you can't make a logical, a sensible decision for whatever reason, you're too badly injured, your mind isn't quite what it should be, that it's written down as to what you want to do. Do not resuscitate me or something. If I get to this particular time, this particular situation, please turn off that machine. I personally would not want to be in a situation where I had no control over my life, my body, whatever it is. I'm sitting there in what is basically a vegetative state. That's a personal opinion. Now, I know a lot of other people will completely disagree with me on this particular thing. They agree their view on the sanctity of life is completely different to mine, and I totally accept everybody's views, and I would like everybody to accept my view as well. If your view isn't the same as mine, that's good. That is absolutely fine, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. But I totally agree with things like living wills. I totally agree with a voluntary euthanasia policy like they have in other countries. We don't let animals suffer. If an animal is suffering, we do something about it. We put them down, we put them to sleep, whichever term we want to do. So why on earth do we allow human beings to go through excruciating pain, living a life which has got nothing to it, in my opinion, and probably in their opinion as well? They have no idea what's going on, and you're sitting there suffering with them. Let's put it that way. Yes, it might sound like a selfish thing, but you have to think of the quality of life of both sides of the family. The quality of life of my father, as he was recently. What about the quality of life for my mother? Something that people don't actually ask a question. Yes, they're all focusing on my father, of course. He's the one who's been ill. He's the one who is ill. He's the one who's suffering, who's 92 years older. But what about my mother? How is she feeling? She's the one who's basically looking after someone. She can't do anything, can't go out of the house really on her own. She has no quality of life as well. So that's two people that are suffering instead of just one. And we've had my mother around here the last 2 days over Christmas because she would have been on her own. The idea was my father was coming round as well, but obviously that couldn't happen. She would have been on her own all that time. I went round, sat with my father so my mother could go out and do things. Other people have done the same sort of thing. And I know that the last thing that she would want to see is my father to suffer any more than he actually needs to. Now, as I said, thankfully, he seems to be on the road to recovery, whatever that might mean. His quality of life is still not what it was, but at least, as I said, he's got it up here. I would hate to be in that particular situation, and I wonder, I've sort of tried to put myself in that situation. If I was his sort of age, I knew I was reaching the end. Let's be honest about this. You have to know, and this is something people don't want to talk about. They put all these things to one side. They don't think about them. The living will type of thing is a great example of that. Someone who's forward thinking. Of course you don't want it to happen to you, to your loved ones, or to anybody for that matter. Of course you don't. But maybe it would be sensible to put these things out into the open, to have a debate about them, whether it be on a personal level like this, an individual level, think about it for yourself, a family level, or even a wider level, a governmental level or something like that. People don't, because they're afraid to talk about it. They don't want to cause offence. I don't want to cause offence as well. But when it comes down to you, I think it's important. I think this is a very important topic. It's been brought home to me very much recently. I hope that nobody else is suffering. I hate to see suffering in anybody, any person, anywhere in the world, or whatever it might be. And if you can ease that suffering in some way or other, surely that is a good thing. So, opening up that debate, as I said, whatever your opinion is, I totally respect it. You can vehemently disagree with me. please make a video response and tell me why you don't agree with me, and I will quite happily accept that. It would be good to hear what other people's ideas are. Maybe you have an experience that you can relay yourself, that you've been through, and maybe you've seen it from both sides. You've seen that situation where someone has hung on to life for basically for as long as they can, and that was a good thing. And other people, you might think you've seen someone suffering for a number of years and you thought that was a bad thing, and maybe there's something you could have done about it or somebody else has done about it. We've seen cases, certainly here in the UK, where people have taken that euthanasia thing upon themselves and they've actually effectively killed somebody. They put them out of their misery. As I said, something that we would do to an animal, we would not allow it to happen to a dog or a cat, and that quite rightly so. We don't like to see them suffer any more than they need to. So why do we allow human beings to suffer as well? Age obviously comes into this as well. There is that issue of if someone is 92, you probably feel slightly different than if they were a teenager or a child or something. And once again, they do accept that there's a difference there. It must be a far harder decision to make, the living will type, voluntary euthanasia type of thing, switching off that machine, that life support system, if it's a child, than if it was a 92-year-old man. I totally accept that. But once again, I went through that with my own daughter when she was 6 or 7 weeks old. She had major heart problems at the time, which I have spoken about before. But there was a situation there where it came to a point with there was an opportunity possibly that we might have to go down a heart transplant route, and that isn't an easy decision to make. But both my wife and myself were very much in agreement, and we said, nope, we don't want that to happen. If that was the decision that had to be made to save her life, or to possibly save her life, to have a heart transplant, we decided, even though our daughter, she was 5-6 weeks old at the time or something like that, we made that decision that we would not want to put her through that. If it meant that she would have to die, that was our decision. No more suffering, no more sort of years and years of suffering potentially in the future, and no real chance of any real structured quality of life in the future. It's not an easy decision to make, but it's one that I've already made in the past. Luckily, we didn't actually have to physically make that decision, but it is something that we thought about at the time. Maybe that has influenced my decision in the future. So there you have it. So that's my point of view. As I said, it's only my point of view. I suspect there's quite a few people who possibly are in agreement with me. Hopefully it's not something that you've had to think about yourself. As I said, this is a topic that I've thought about for quite some time, possibly because my father was getting older and older, and it's inevitable what the conclusion is going to be at some time or another. So you think about it more, and talking to my mother recently, it's something that she's thought about as well. So there you are, the thoughts out there. I thought I'd put my own personal stories out there. As I said, I'm not looking for sympathy at all. I'm looking for opinions, have a debate about this, and just find out what other people's thoughts are about this. Maybe what your own experiences are about this. Because one of those things about this, about vlogging and everything like this, is actually talking about things, getting things out into the open, having that discussion, whether it be between your own family or whether it be between a wider discussion or something to get out there as well. I've thought about making my own sort of like personal videos, just to talk these things through and to get them out into the open for my own personal benefit. But obviously over Christmas it's one of those things, the family have been around, that we've talked about quite openly with my mother, my wife, my kids as well, who came up to the hospital with us as well. We felt that was quite an important thing to do, and thankfully they were quite happy to come along and wanted to as well, which is a very nice thing to see. And I know that my father was very much appreciative of them coming into the hospital and seeing him on Christmas Day, because let's be honest, you never know how long these people have got. Hopefully it's a lot longer, but hopefully it's also with that quality of life as well. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. As I said, I'd love to hear your stories, your thoughts, your opinions, anything about this particular subject, and just to see what other people feel about it, even if it's only to get people to think about it and maybe talk about it a little bit more. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for your time. I shall speak to you again soon. Goodbye.